Man kicks a police dog for fun, not realizing it would lead to his arrest an hour later. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The sun was setting over the city, casting a golden hue over the busy streets as people rushed home after a long day. In a quieter part of town, Officer Ryan Caldwell was finishing up his routine patrol with his K9 partner, Shadow. Shadow, a highly trained Belgian Malinois, was more than just a police dog. He was Ryan's most trusted companion, his loyal partner in keeping the community safe. As they walked past a local park, Ryan let Shadow stretch his legs for a bit, allowing the dog to sniff around while he greeted a few familiar faces in the neighborhood. Most people in the area knew Shadow. Kids loved seeing him, and many shop owners would greet him with a pat on the head or a quick treat. But not everyone in the city respected the K9 unit. Just as Ryan was about to head back to the station, a loud bark echoed through the street. Turning sharply, Ryan saw a man, mid-30s, scruffy beard, wearing a worn-out leather jacket. Standing over Shadow, his face twisted into an ugly smirk. "You think you're tough, huh?" The man sneered, raising his boot. Before Ryan could react, the man kicked Shadow hard. The impact sent the dog stumbling back a few steps, his body twisting from the unexpected attack. A hush fell over the area as several bystanders gasped in shock. Ryan's blood boiled. His first instinct was to grab the man right then and there, but as a trained officer, he knew better than to act on impulse. Shadow, ever the professional, didn't lash out. Instead, he stood his ground, his ears pinned back, his deep brown eyes locked onto the attacker with unshakable focus. Ryan clenched his fists. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked, stepping between the man and Shadow. The man let out a drunken chuckle, his breath reeking of alcohol. "Relax, officer," he slurred. "It's just a dog. What's he gonna do? Arrest me?" He laughed, looking around, as if expecting others to join in. But the gathered crowd remained silent, their expressions a mix of disgust and anger. Ryan exhaled sharply, trying to keep his temper in check. "You just assaulted a police K9. That's a felony." The man rolled his eyes, waving Ryan off. "Oh, come on. Like you're really gonna arrest me for tapping a mutt? I bet he's had worse in training." Ryan took a step forward, but before he could act, the man turned and staggered away, his laugh echoing through the park. Ryan wanted to chase after him, but he had a better idea. He reached down, gently checking on Shadow, who licked his hand reassuringly. The dog wasn't injured, but he was watching the man's retreating figure with sharp, unblinking eyes. Ryan pulled out his radio. "Control, this is Officer Caldwell. I need a facial match on a suspect. Caucasian male, mid-30s, brown jacket, intoxicated. Assaulted my K9 partner. Walking westbound on Lexington Avenue." "Copy that, Officer Caldwell," the dispatcher responded. "We'll pull up any known records and send backup to your location." Ryan smirked. The man had no idea what he had just done. The streetlights flickered on as the intoxicated man continued his staggered walk down Lexington Avenue, completely oblivious to the storm he had just unleashed upon himself. Ryan watched him disappear around the corner before kneeling beside Shadow, running his hands through the thick fur behind the dog's ears. "You okay, buddy?" he murmured. Shadow gave a soft whine but quickly straightened up, his posture unshaken. A trained K9 never showed weakness, and despite the unexpected assault, Shadow was ready to continue his duty. Ryan gave him an appreciative scratch before standing up, his mind already calculating his next move. Ryan's radio crackled to life. "Officer Caldwell, we have an ID match on your suspect. Name Tyler Briggs. Multiple priors, including public intoxication, assault, and destruction of property. Lives in a rundown apartment complex 2 blocks from your location." Ryan gritted his teeth. Tyler Briggs wasn't just some random drunk causing trouble. He was a repeat offender with a history of reckless behavior. If he was already violent enough to attack a police dog in public, who knew what else he was capable of? "Copy that," Ryan replied. "I'm en route to his last known residence." Advise backup to meet me there. As he turned to go, a soft voice called out from behind him. Officer. Ryan turned to see an elderly woman standing nearby, gripping the handle of a small cart filled with groceries. She looked concerned, her wrinkled face etched with worry. That man, she said, glancing in the direction Tyler had gone. I've seen him before. He lives in my building. Always causing trouble, always drunk. But lately, she hesitated, lowering her voice. Lately, he's been acting worse. I hear him yelling in the halls at night, and the noises from his apartment. She trailed off, shaking her head. Ryan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about Shadow anymore. There was something bigger going on. If Briggs was spiraling into more aggressive behavior, it could put others at risk. Thank you, ma'am, Ryan said. We'll take care of it. With a quick pat on Shadow's side, Ryan led his partner toward the apartment complex, his eyes scanning the dimly lit streets. Every second counted. The apartment building was exactly what Ryan expected. Run down, littered with graffiti, and the kind of place where crime thrived in the shadows. The smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke clung to the air as he stepped into the narrow hallway, Shadow walking alertly by his side. The landlord, an exhausted-looking man in a sweat-stained t-shirt, barely looked up from his newspaper when Ryan approached. Briggs? Yeah, third floor, apartment 3B, he muttered. Loud bastard owes me 2 months' rent. If you're here to take him away, be my guest. Ryan nodded, making his way up the creaky stairs. As he reached the third floor, he noticed something immediately. The door to 3B was slightly ajar. His instincts kicked in, hand resting on his holstered weapon. Ryan motioned for Shadow to stay close as he approached the door. He nudged it open with his foot, revealing an absolute disaster of an apartment. Empty beer bottles littered the floor. The couch was torn apart. A broken chair lay in the middle of the room. But what caught Ryan's attention most of all? A faint whimpering sound. Ryan froze. Shadow's ears perked up, his body tensing. The sound was coming from the bedroom. Slowly, Ryan pushed open the bedroom door, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A young boy, no older than 6, was curled up in the corner of the room, his arms wrapped around a shivering black and white puppy. His cheek was bruised, and his wide, terrified eyes darted toward Ryan, then to the doorway as if expecting someone to barge in behind him. Ryan's jaw clenched. Hey, buddy, he said softly, lowering himself to the boy's eye level. It's okay. I'm here to help. The boy didn't speak, but Shadow, ever intuitive, stepped forward slowly, his tail wagging gently as he lowered his head, emitting a soft, comforting whine. The boy's grip on the puppy loosened just slightly, and then footsteps pounded up the stairs. Ryan whirled around, just as Tyler Briggs stormed through the doorway, his face twisted in rage. You gotta be kidding me, Briggs slurred, eyes bloodshot. What the hell do you think you're doing in my apartment? Ryan stood protectively in front of the child, his hand hovering over his taser. I could ask you the same thing, Ryan shot back. Why is this kid in here? And why does he look like he's been through hell? Briggs laughed darkly, running a hand through his greasy hair. What him? He gestured toward the boy. He's my nephew. His mom left him here for a bit. Kid's always crying about something. Ryan's fingers twitched. The bruises on the boy's arms said otherwise. Back up, Ryan ordered, his voice like steel. Now, Briggs gritted his teeth, his muscles tensing. Ryan knew that look, the moment before a suspect does something stupid. And sure enough, Briggs lunged. Ryan reacted instantly, stepping forward and grabbing Briggs by the wrist, twisting it behind his back in one swift motion. Shadow sprang into action, his teeth clamping down on Briggs's pant leg, yanking him off balance. Briggs screamed, thrashing as Ryan slammed him against the wall. You're under arrest for assaulting an officer, assaulting a K-9, and endangering a minor, Ryan growled. You have the right to remain silent. Briggs didn't even have time to struggle before the sound of sirens filled the air. Within moments, backup officers swarmed the apartment, taking Briggs into custody. Ryan turned back to the boy, who was still gripping the puppy tightly, his little fingers shaking. "Come on, kiddo," Ryan said gently. "Let's get you out of here." As they stepped out of the apartment, the boy finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Is Shadow gonna bite him again?" Ryan chuckled, patting Shadow's head. "Nah, buddy. He's done his job. Now it's time to go home." And with that, he led the boy away from the nightmare he'd been living in, straight toward safety. The ride to the station was silent except for the occasional crackle of the radio. Ryan kept glancing at the boy in the back seat, who still held onto the puppy like a lifeline. Shadow sat beside him, his warm presence offering quiet reassurance. The boy's eyes flickered toward the police dog every few seconds, his tiny fingers stroking the puppy's fur absent-mindedly. It was clear that he was trying to process everything that had just happened. At the station, Ryan led the boy inside while another officer took Briggs into custody. The little one hesitated at the door, looking up at Ryan uncertainly. Is he gonna find me?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ryan crouched down to his level. "Not a chance, buddy. You're safe now." Social services had already been contacted, and within the hour, a caseworker named Melissa arrived. She was a warm, kind-eyed woman in her mid-40s, dressed in a soft beige sweater that seemed carefully chosen to avoid looking intimidating. She kneeled beside the boy, offering a gentle smile. "Hi there, sweetheart. My name's Melissa. I'm here to make sure you have a safe place to stay." The boy tensed, looking at Ryan for reassurance. "What about my puppy?" Melissa exchanged a glance with Ryan before smiling. "Well, that depends. Do you have any family that can take care of you both?" The boy shook his head. "My mom left me there. I don't think she's coming back." Ryan's heart clenched. The kid had been abandoned, left in the hands of a violent man who didn't even care about him. "How about we figure something out together?" Ryan suggested, keeping his voice light. "Shadow here can stay with you for a little while. Would you like that?" The boy nodded eagerly, for the first time showing a small spark of hope. "Really?" Melissa smiled. "We'll do our best." Before long, the process was underway. As paperwork was completed and phone calls were made, Ryan sat with the boy in the quiet lounge of the precinct. Shadow curled up at their feet, the puppy nestled against his side. "What's his name?" Ryan asked, nodding toward the small dog. The boy hesitated. "I never gave him one." Ryan chuckled. "Well, maybe now's the perfect time." The boy thought for a moment before whispering, "Mac." Ryan grinned. "That's a great name." A few minutes later, Melissa approached. "We found a temporary foster home with a really nice family. They even have a big backyard." She hesitated. "But there's one problem." Ryan already knew what she was about to say. "They won't take Max, will they?" Melissa shook her head regretfully. "No pets allowed." The boy's face fell. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Then I'll take him," he said before he could stop himself. Melissa blinked. "What?" Ryan shrugged. "I mean, I can foster him, at least until we find a solution." The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? You'll take care of Max?" Ryan smiled. "Of course. He's already family, isn't he?" Melissa exhaled, clearly relieved. "All right, I'll make a note of it." As they prepared to leave, the boy threw his arms around Ryan, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," he whispered. Ryan patted his back. "Anytime, kiddo." He watched as the caseworker led him out of the station, a mix of relief and sadness settling in his chest. He knew the boy had a long road ahead, but for now he was safe. And Max? Well, Max had found a home, too. As Ryan turned to leave, Shadow nudged his leg, looking up at him with knowing eyes. Ryan chuckled. Yeah, looks like we got ourselves another roommate." And with that, they headed home together. That night, as Ryan settled into his couch with Max curled up beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that today had changed more than just one life. Shadow lay at his feet, his ears perked in quiet alertness, watching over both his human and the new addition to their little family. Max, despite everything, had fallen asleep quickly, his small body pressed into Ryan's side, as if he finally felt safe. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He never thought he'd be the type to take in a stray, let alone 2. But here he was, with a traumatized puppy curled into him and a case that had left him feeling more unsettled than usual. Briggs had been arrested, but that didn't erase the years of neglect and abuse the boy had suffered. It didn't erase the way his eyes darted around like he expected someone to jump out and take him back. Shadow shifted, resting his massive head on Ryan's knee, and Ryan absent-mindedly scratched behind his ears. "Yeah, bud," he murmured. "I know. You feel it too? Huh." The K9 let out a soft huff in response. The next morning, Ryan woke to Max licking his face. The puppy, clearly having adopted him as his new guardian, wagged his tiny tail and jumped excitedly against his chest. Ryan groaned but couldn't help the chuckle that followed. All right, I'm up." Shadow was already by the door, waiting for his morning walk. Ryan pulled on a hoodie, clipped Max into a temporary harness, and led both dogs outside. The sun was barely up, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. As they walked, Ryan's mind wandered. He had already filed his report on the case, but something about it still gnawed at him. Why had the mother abandoned her son? Why had Briggs been so quick to get rid of him? And what if there was something bigger beneath the surface? Ryan exhaled sharply. He wasn't a detective. He was just a cop who got lucky every now and then. But something told him this wasn't over. When he got back home, his phone buzzed. It was Melissa. "Hey, Ryan," she said. "I wanted to give you an update on the boy." Ryan's stomach tightened. "Yeah? How's he doing?" "He's adjusting," Melissa replied, though there was hesitation in her voice. "But there's something I need to tell you. I did some digging and, well, I think the boy's mother may have been in trouble. There are some missing persons reports tied to that area. Some cases that don't quite add up." Ryan felt his pulse quicken. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Melissa sighed, "this might be bigger than we thought." Ryan looked down at Max, who sat at his feet, looking up at him with those trusting eyes. Shadow, too, watched him carefully, as if sensing the weight of what was coming. Ryan exhaled. "All right," he said, voice firm. "Tell me everything." Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping his coffee mug tightly. Melissa's words echoed in his mind. Missing persons. Cases that don't add up. He had handled plenty of cases in his time as an officer, but something about this one unsettled him in a way he couldn't shake. Shadow lay near the doorway, his amber eyes locked on Ryan, his instincts seemingly mirroring his handler's unease. Max, on the other hand, happily gnawed on a chew toy Ryan had picked up for him earlier that morning. The little pup had already started to come out of his shell, but his fear was still evident in the way he flinched at sudden movements. Ryan took a slow sip of his coffee before dialing Melissa back. She answered on the second ring. "You got more for me?" he asked. She sighed. "Yeah, I spent most of the night combing through records. The boy's mother, Natalie, disappeared 6 months ago. She was last seen leaving her job at a diner a few towns over. But then, nothing. No financial transactions, no official records. Nothing." Ryan's gut tightened. "So she didn't just abandon him?" "I don't think so," Melissa said. "And here's the thing, her name came up in another case. A man named Edward Calloway filed a police report saying she had told him she was in danger. That was 2 days before she vanished." Ryan ran a hand down his face. "Let me guess. Calloway disappeared too." "Bingo," Melissa confirmed. 2 weeks later, car found abandoned near the state border. No sign of him. Ryan exhaled sharply. This wasn't just a bad custody dispute or a neglect case. This was something else entirely. "Briggs knew something," Ryan murmured, mostly to himself. "I think so," Melissa agreed. "And considering how quickly he tried to shut you down, I'd bet my badge he's in deep." Ryan's thoughts churned. The kid. He's got to know something. Even if he doesn't realize it. Melissa hesitated. "Ryan, I know that look in your eyes. Don't go full rogue on this." "I won't," he said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. After hanging up, Ryan crouched beside Max, rubbing his tiny head. "You're the key to this, aren't you, buddy?" The pup gave him a curious look, his tail wagging uncertainly. Shadow let out a quiet huff as if agreeing. Ryan knew he had a choice. He could file the report, let the case run its course, and hope someone connected the dots. Or he could start digging himself. His decision was made before he even stood up. Later that day, Ryan found himself back at the station, standing outside Briggs' holding cell. The man sat on the bench, his arms crossed over his chest, glaring at the floor. "Briggs," Ryan called, leaning against the bars. "We need to talk." Briggs scoffed. "Got nothing to say to you, officer." Ryan smirked. "I think you do, because I just found out Natalie didn't abandon that kid. She disappeared." Briggs' jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Ryan leaned in slightly. "See, here's the thing. I don't think you're the type to just take in some random kid. And I don't think you're the type to panic unless you know something you shouldn't." Briggs' hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? Because the last person who knew Natalie was in trouble vanished too. And something tells me you don't want to be next." That got a reaction. Briggs' eyes darted toward him, filled with something that almost looked like fear. Ryan crossed his arms. "So, Briggs, who are you really afraid of?" For a long moment, Briggs said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, he muttered, "You don't want to get involved in this." Ryan's stomach twisted. "Too late." Briggs exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Look, all I'll say is, the people Natalie ran from, they don't leave loose ends." Ryan stared at him. "And the kid? Is he a loose end?" Briggs hesitated, then nodded once. "Yeah." A chill ran down Ryan's spine. "Then I need to find out who they are before they find him." Ryan sat back in his chair, tapping his fingers on his desk as his mind raced. Briggs' warning echoed in his ears. The people Natalie ran from don't leave loose ends. That meant they would be coming for Max. They would want to tie up the loose ends. And if Briggs was afraid, that meant they were powerful enough to silence anyone who got in their way. He needed more information, and he needed it fast. Shadow sat at his feet, his ears perked up as if sensing Ryan's tension. Max was curled up beside him, his tiny frame pressed against the larger K9 for comfort. The sight of the small dog, unaware of the danger surrounding him, only strengthened Ryan's resolve. He picked up his phone and called Melissa. She answered immediately. "You're not gonna let this go, are you?" she said knowingly. "Nope," Ryan replied. "And neither should you. We need to dig deeper." Melissa sighed. "What do you have?" "Briggs is scared. He said Natalie ran from people who don't leave loose ends. That means Max is in danger." Melissa was quiet for a moment. "Damn, that's bad." "Yeah," Ryan agreed. "I need every piece of information on Natalie's life before she disappeared. Who she talked to, where she worked, who she was involved with." "I'll see what I can find," Melissa said. "But Ryan, if these people are as dangerous as Briggs says..." "I know," Ryan cut her off. "I'll be careful." After hanging up, Ryan turned to his computer. If Melissa was looking into Natalie, he would start with Edward Calloway, the man who had reported her in danger before vanishing himself. He pulled up Calloway's police report. The details were scarce. Just a note that he had filed a complaint about being followed, and that he believed Natalie was in danger. The report had been closed due to lack of evidence. Ryan frowned. There was a name listed under the officer who handled the report. Detective Eric Wilkins. That name sent a surge of anger through Ryan's chest. Wilkins was dirty. He had been on the force for years, covering up crimes for people with deep pockets. He had never been caught, but everyone knew he was untouchable. And now, Wilkins had been the one to handle Calloway's report. Ryan clenched his jaw. That couldn't be a coincidence. Deciding he needed to pay Wilkins a visit, he grabbed his keys and headed out. Shadow followed, and Ryan knelt beside him, rubbing his head. "Stay with Max, buddy. I'll be back soon." The K9 whined softly but obeyed, lying down next to the small pup. Ryan drove to the precinct, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. If Wilkins was involved, things were worse than he thought. When he arrived, Wilkins was sitting at his desk, sipping a coffee as if he didn't have a care in the world. Ryan walked straight up to him. "Wilkins." The older detective looked up and smirked. "Officer Carter, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Ryan didn't bother with pleasantries. Edward Calloway filed a report with you about being followed. 2 days later, he vanished. Wilkins' smirk faltered for just a second before he covered it with a laugh. And? People disappear all the time, Carter. Ryan narrowed his eyes. Yeah, but not right after reporting they're in danger. And not when the officer handling their case has a reputation for making problems disappear. Wilkins leaned back in his chair, feigning boredom. Watch yourself, Carter. Ryan wasn't intimidated. Tell me what you know. Wilkins sipped his coffee, looking at Ryan over the rim. You should walk away from this. Ryan's blood boiled. He slammed his hands on the desk. That kid's life is on the line. If you know something, you'd better start talking. Wilkins stared at him for a long moment. Then, with a quiet chuckle, he leaned in. Carter, if you dig too deep, you won't like what you find. Some people in this city, they own everything. Including you, if you're not careful. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. He had heard vague whispers of powerful figures pulling strings behind the scenes, but he had never believed them until now. Last chance, Wilkins, Ryan said, his voice low. Tell me who took Natalie. Wilkins smirked again, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. You're already in too deep, Carter. And now, you're on their radar. Ryan clenched his fists. He had come looking for answers, but all he had found was more questions, and a chilling realization. Whoever these people were, they knew he was looking, and now they were looking for him too. Ryan left the precinct with a weight on his shoulders. He had come looking for answers, but all he had found was a deeper conspiracy, and now he was part of it. Wilkins' warning wasn't just a scare tactic, it was a promise. Someone powerful knew he was looking into Natalie and Edward Calloway, and now they had set their sights on him. Back in his car, he took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had to think. If Wilkins wouldn't talk, he needed another angle. Melissa was already digging into Natalie's past, but what about Calloway? If he was the last person to warn about Natalie's danger, then maybe his disappearance wasn't just bad luck. Maybe it was a message. His phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Melissa, found something on Calloway. Not good. Meet me at the diner in 20. Ryan's pulse quickened. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove straight to their usual meeting spot. The moment he walked in, he spotted Melissa sitting in the corner booth, a file in front of her and a grave look on her face. Tell me, he said as he slid into the seat across from her. Melissa pushed the file toward him. Calloway wasn't just some guy looking out for Natalie. He was a journalist. Ryan raised a brow. A journalist? Melissa nodded. Investigative reporter. He was working on a big story. Something about corruption and illegal operations tied to some powerful figures. She paused. And he wasn't working alone. Ryan's heart pounded. Who was he working with? Melissa hesitated, then flipped open the file to a black and white photo. Natalie. Ryan's blood ran cold. Natalie hadn't just been running from dangerous people. She had been trying to expose them, and Calloway had been trying to help her. That explains why they wanted her gone, Ryan muttered. She wasn't just a runaway. She was a threat. Melissa nodded grimly, and Calloway was silenced for trying to help her. Ryan exhaled sharply. So if Natalie's still alive, they'll want to finish the job. Melissa's expression darkened. And if they know you're looking for her, Ryan, you might be next. Ryan leaned back in the booth, running a hand down his face. He wasn't the type to scare easily. But this was different. This wasn't just some crime ring. This was something bigger, something that had already claimed lives. I need to find her before they do, he said. Melissa nodded. I'll keep digging, but you need to be careful. Whoever these people are, they have reach. Ryan knew that all too well. He had seen men like Wilkins before, people who did the dirty work for those who thought they were untouchable. If Natalie had uncovered something that could bring them down, then she was still in danger. And now so was he. Later that night, Ryan sat in his apartment, staring at the pieces of the puzzle he had so far. A journalist working with a missing woman. A corrupt detective covering it up. Powerful figures pulling strings behind the scenes. Shadow lay at his feet, eyes alert, sensing his tension. Max, the little dog Natalie had left behind, was curled up on the couch. Ryan glanced at the pup. "You might be the only clue I have left," he muttered. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "Unknown number. Stop looking." Ryan's chest tightened. He had been expecting this. His phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. You have one warning. Walk away." Ryan clenched his jaw. Someone was watching him. Shadow let out a low growl, his ears perking up. Ryan's instincts flared. He wasn't alone. Slowly, he stood, reaching for his gun. His eyes darted toward the window. A shadow moved outside. He was out of time. The hunt had begun. Ryan moved swiftly, keeping his breath steady as he flattened against the wall. Shadow stayed alert, his ears perked toward the movement outside. Whoever was watching him had finally decided to get closer. Reaching into the drawer by the couch, Ryan pulled out his sidearm, chambering around with a quiet click. He shut off the lamp, allowing the shadows of his apartment to blend him into the darkness. Outside, the streetlight flickered, briefly illuminating the silhouette of a man near the fire escape. Ryan's heartbeat slowed. Years of training had taught him to read a situation, and right now he could feel the tension thickening in the air. Whoever this was, they weren't just looking to intimidate him. They were here to send a message. He waited, barely breathing, as the window latch twitched. A second later, the glass shifted slightly, and the frame creaked. Someone was testing it, trying to lift it silently. "Not on my watch." In one swift motion, Ryan yanked the curtain aside and leveled his gun at the intruder. "Move, and I put you down," he warned, voice low but firm. The masked figure froze, one gloved hand still on the latch. Then, faster than Ryan expected, the man yanked the window open and dove inside. Ryan fired, a precise shot aimed at the man's shoulder, but the figure twisted at the last second, avoiding the bullet as he crashed onto the floor. Shadow lunged, his growl turning into a vicious bark as he snapped at the intruder's arm. The man twisted, knocking over a lamp in the process, and tried to shove Shadow off. Ryan didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot into the guy's ribs, sending him sprawling against the coffee table. "Who sent you?" Ryan demanded, gun aimed at the man's head. The masked figure didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something from his belt and threw it toward Ryan. A flashbang. Ryan had barely enough time to shut his eyes before the small device detonated with a blinding white light and deafening sound. The room spun as his ears rang, disorienting him just long enough for the intruder to scramble toward the window. Shadow barked, still dazed from the explosion, but the masked man was already moving. Ryan fought against the burning sensation in his eyes and lunged after him. Too late. By the time Ryan reached the window, the figure had vanished into the alleyway below, blending into the night. Ryan swore under his breath, slamming the window shut. His ears were still ringing, but his mind was clear. This wasn't just a warning. This was a declaration of war. Ryan took a few minutes to steady himself before grabbing his phone. He dialed Melissa's number, pacing the room as he tried to regain control of his adrenaline. She picked up on the second ring. "Ryan?" Her voice was groggy. He had probably woken her up. "We've got a problem." Melissa sat up instantly. "What happened?" "Someone broke into my apartment," he said, still scanning the shadows outside his window. They were fast, professional. Knew exactly what they were doing. Melissa cursed. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. But they used a flashbang and got away before I could stop them. They were here for a reason." There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then, Melissa exhaled sharply. "You need to leave town, Ryan." Ryan let out a humorless chuckle. "You think they wouldn't find me anywhere else?" She sighed. "Okay. Then what's the plan?" Ryan glanced at Max, the small dog curled up on his couch, completely unaware of the chaos around him. Then at Shadow, who sat at attention, waiting for a command. "I need to find Natalie before they do," he said firmly. "And I need to figure out what she knew that got Calloway killed." Melissa hesitated. "You think she's still alive?" Ryan closed his eyes for a second. "She has to be, because if she wasn't..." He was running out of reasons to keep fighting. By morning, Ryan had gathered what little information he had left. He knew two things for certain: Calloway had been working on something big, and Natalie had been involved. The next step? Finding out who else Calloway had been in contact with before he disappeared. Ryan drove to an old newsroom, a place Calloway had worked before he went underground. It was abandoned now, the windows covered in dust, the once bustling office reduced to nothing but silence. Inside, he found old documents scattered across desks, faded notes pinned to a bulletin board. He sifted through them, searching for anything with Calloway's name. Then he found it, a notebook. Flipping through the pages, Ryan's breath caught as he read the scribbled notes. Names, dates, locations, and one phrase written over and over again: "The truth is buried beneath the lies." His gut clenched. This wasn't just about corruption. This was something deeper, something worth killing for. Ryan turned the page, and there it was. A final entry, a name underlined twice. Natalie is the key. Find her before they do. Ryan's grip tightened. He had his answer. Now he just had to survive long enough to use it. Ryan knew he was running out of time. Whoever had broken into his apartment the night before wasn't just there to intimidate him. They were looking for something he wasn't even sure he had yet. But if there was one thing Ryan understood, it was that the best way to flush out the people hunting you was to make yourself bait. The address in Calloway's notebook was the only lead he had left. A storage unit on the edge of town, in a rundown industrial park where the streetlights barely worked and the roads were cracked with neglect. He parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, keeping to the shadows, his pulse steady but alert. Shadow walked beside him, his ears twitching at every sound. Ryan had trained him well, but tonight, he wasn't sure even Shadow's instincts could keep them safe. The storage facility was quiet, too quiet. A few of the units had padlocks rusting from years of disuse, but others looked well-maintained. Ryan moved past them, counting the numbers on the doors. Unit 314. That was the one Calloway had written down. He reached it, pressing his back against the cold metal door and listening. No movement inside. He exhaled, kneeling to inspect the lock. It had been tampered with recently. Scratches on the metal, the latch just slightly loose. Someone had been here before him. With a deep breath, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a set of lockpicks. Took him less than a minute to slide the latch free. Shadow growled low in his throat. Ryan froze. Then, in a single motion, he pushed the door open and raised his weapon, stepping inside. The unit was dark, but his eyes adjusted quickly. Stacks of old boxes, some overturned, papers strewn across the floor. A small desk, dusty but recently used, sat in the far corner with an open laptop on it, the screen still glowing faintly. Someone had left in a hurry. Ryan moved forward, Shadow staying close. He picked up a few scattered documents, scanning them. They were articles, investigations Calloway had been working on. Political scandals, cover-ups, corporate fraud. But one name kept appearing over and over again: Atlas Corp. Ryan had heard of them, a major security contractor, rumored to have its hands in everything from government surveillance to private military operations. If Calloway had been digging into them, no wonder he ended up dead. The laptop. Ryan sat down, fingers hovering over the keyboard. It required a password. Of course, he was about to start guessing when he noticed a post-it note stuck to the side of the desk. A single word written hastily: Natalie. His breath caught. He typed the name in. The screen flashed, then unlocked. Files upon files opened before him, Calloway's research laid bare. Emails, financial records, photos, evidence. Proof of something big, something deadly. Ryan scrolled through quickly, snapping photos with his phone. He didn't have time to read everything now, but he could analyze it later. Then, a noise outside. Footsteps. Ryan shut the laptop and grabbed it under his arm, moving fast. He slipped into the shadows, pressing himself against the wall just as the door creaked open. A flashlight beam swept across the room. Two men stepped inside. Ryan's jaw tightened. They were dressed in dark tactical gear, armed. Professionals. One of them cursed. "We're too late. Someone's already been here. Check the files," the other said. Ryan didn't wait to hear more. He moved. In one swift motion, he grabbed the nearest metal shelf and yanked it down, sending a crash of boxes and debris cascading onto the men. They shouted, one of them cursing as he stumbled backward. Ryan didn't stick around. He bolted for the door, Shadow right beside him. Gunfire erupted behind him. He dove behind a car, bullets ricocheting off the concrete. Shadow growled, ready to lunge, but Ryan held him back. "Not now," he murmured. More footsteps, more men coming. He was outnumbered. He had no choice. He reached into his pocket and pressed the dial on his phone. Melissa picked up instantly. "Ryan?" "No time," he breathed. "I need an exit. I'm tracking your location. Give me 30 seconds. He peeked around the car. The men were spreading out, scanning the area. Shadow tensed. Then Melissa's voice in his ear. "Back alley. East side. Go now." Ryan didn't hesitate. He sprinted. Shadow ran beside him, the two of them weaving through the darkness. More gunshots. Ryan ignored them. The alley was just ahead. He pushed forward, heart pounding. Then headlights flared to life. A black SUV screeched around the corner. Melissa leaned out the window. "Get in." Ryan didn't slow. He dove for the door, pulling Shadow in with him just as the bullets slammed into the side of the vehicle. Melissa floored the gas. The SUV peeled away, tires screeching, leaving the gunman in the dust. Ryan exhaled. That was too close. He turned to Melissa. "We need to talk." She nodded, eyes on the road. "Yeah," she said. "We do."